join me on the debate stage. Let's have another debate. There's more to talk about, and the voters of America deserve to hear the conversations that I think we should be having on substance, on issues, on policies. What's your plan? What's my plan? And we should have another one before Election Day.
Hi, I'm Ana Marie Cox. This is 90 Days with Ana Marie Cox, where it's an election countdown, where we talk about this wild, unprecedented, and weird election. It is now 41 days until the election. I am not in my home studio. I am, if you do a stop on this, you'll see I'm at the American Gin Hotel in Oslo. So I've been kind of divorced from what's going on, which is why I'm really happy to have as my guest Mandela Barnes, the former Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin and now man about town, who I assume has been paying attention to the election at least closer than I have. And that is my first question for you, sir, is what have I been missing? What's going on?
What have you been missing? You missed so much. You've missed so much. You know,
well, I've only been here for 5 days, so
you've missed so much.
Okay.
You've missed so much. Every day is like 5 days, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, the really ironic part about it all is that it's such a truncated election cycle with Kamala Harris assuming the nomination just 2 months ago. But at the same time, it feels like it's been 5 campaigns already. Just the amount of spending that's already taken place, the amount of money that's been raised, and the amount of activity like this and that. I think about the new coalitions we're seeing come around. I think about the new momentum, even with younger voters. And it's sort of astonishing. I really cannot wait until this election is over because I would like to study this more because nobody could have predicted that it would happen this way. I think about, a year ago where people are like, oh, well, the vice president, she's deeply unpopular. People don't like her. And it's like, well, she's nominee and people seem to love her. And it seems as if she's built some unlikely allies to help get her over the hump or some unlikely partnerships to help get her over the hump. And I think it's quite remarkable. We have literally never seen anything like this happen before. And to be a part of it, it's very surreal. A part of me wants to get out of this film. It feels like a time warp. It feels like Alice in Wonderland. But we got 41 days to get there. It feels just like we're in a different place when I say Alice in Wonderland. It just seems like so far from reality, this entire cycle. The absurdity of a JD Vance, somebody who does a complete disservice to my generation, somebody who could not be less representative of millennials, and for him to be this close to becoming vice president of the United States of America is something that frightens me and compels me into action.
In general, you could say this is an election where the Democrats are kind of doing America better, or I don't like the word better, but they are hearkening to some of the themes that usually Republicans monopolize. Things like freedom. That seems like a weird thing to say, but like freedom, liberty, the ideals of America, the Constitution,
right?
That kind of thing.
And you mentioned freedom, and it's odd how it's been co-opted. You look at the Freedom Caucus, there are very few, if any, Black people in the Freedom Caucus, which is the wildest thing to think about. But when you say how Democrats are, embracing this country and sort of wrapping themselves in a flag, the thing about it is the perfect comparison of patriotism versus nationalism. And Republicans have jumped the shark a long time ago, and they've waded into those waters of nationalism. And that is where they are firmly planted. And Democrats have always been more patriotic. It's just some of the associations because of nationalism has made some folks hesitant to embrace the country. And I think that to truly love this country is to understand all the flaws, to understand its complicated history and fight to make it better for everybody here. And the thing about truly loving the country is to love the people who are in it. And what you get from the other side is sort of a pushback. You get sort of a refusal, not even a hesitance, a flat out refusal to accept people in this country for who they are, whether it's, where they were born, how they identify, who they love, how they look, the color of their skin. These are things that Republicans have used as wedge issues. And if they continue to do that, as they will, it is just a deeper signal of who they truly represent. And that is a very unitary idea of this country. And that's not who we are.
I mean, I think that it's a truth that activists have been able to highlight in a way that the Democratic Party hasn't, which is that, one of the greatest expressions of love for this country is to criticize it. And that there are no more patriotic people than the people who have fought the hardest to make this country better, whether that's Black Americans or activists or immigrants who have come to this country or labor rights activists or tenants' rights activists. Like, those are the people who have made the country better, and they could have left. They could have not come here. And here they are, pushing us forward rather than holding us back. So I agree. I love that point about the Freedom Caucus. That's so good. You are an amazing candidate, I think, personally. And your facility, if I do say so myself, one of the things I really admire is your facility with people. I think that's a real hallmark of your campaigns, is just be able to talk to people, right? What's wrong with JD Vance?
His complete inability to be just a person who exists in a space.
I don't want you to help him, but part of me is like, can you critique what he's doing wrong?
No, the guy needs some help. It just totally impersonal. Like, he just does not have an ability to make a genuine connection with any person. And that's what happens too when you are so motivated by ambition alone. And if you can't, what's always said, you can't lead the people unless you love the people. JD Vance has zero love for people who are not JD Vance. And it is very evident in the way that he approaches any sort of situation. There's zero sincerity. There is a complete lack of empathy. He doesn't know how to shake a hand. He doesn't know how to properly even greet a person. And I don't know if he's a person who has developed the social skills to even have a social network. And that's one thing too, that I personally, judge politicians, other elected officials. I'm like, well, do you have actual friends? Do you have people you associate with outside of this space? Because I see it so often, and it's like the only people I have ever seen you around are either other elected officials or people you're trying to raise money from, or people you're working with in government. Like, I have never seen you around a person who has nothing to do with politics. And if a person can't just spend the time with regular people in the real world, I think that it is very indicative of an inability to actually govern properly and appropriate. And when people ask me, I'm going to run for office again, I do get that question often. It's like, I've gotten to spend more time with my friends than I've ever gotten to spend in a long time, right? I get to hang out and be social now. And I get to, see my friends' kids. I get to go to family members' events. I get to just sort of, be in a place that I hadn't been able to be in before. And it's something that I truly have missed. But when I see a lot of people out there, that world is completely shut off, because the only thing that's on folks' mind is running for office, the next office, raising money to get that office. And there's zero, space for any other sort of social interaction. I think it does them a disservice. And that's when people lose office, lose a race, lose an election. They just can't take it because it's all that they have. And, I've always strived to make sure that I have my base that will be there no matter what. I have my friends. Losing this race for the U.S. Senate, not winning this race for U.S. Senate 2 years ago, I had been there before. I lost the race for state Senate in 2016. And the same friends, the same people who were there after that race in 2016, the same people who were there after my race 2 years ago, same people who are here now. And, if they were there then, they're going to be with me for the long haul, and that's to be appreciated.
So I'm hearing from you. So again, I mean, I don't think JD Vance is going to watch this, so I feel like we could probably give him some advice here, and it's not like he's going to hear it or change. But what I'm hearing from you is most important thing would be, if we were going to consult with JD Vance, would be get some friends. Like, find some friends if you have them. That will help. Number two, learn how to shake hands. Like, is that is that the next thing?
Yeah.
Okay, and then I mean, I don't know. How do you teach someone to shake hands?
You
Like,
know, you just like gotta, put them somewhere, send him to a Rotary meeting or something. I don't know. Like it's all sort of stuff that he can do, like things that he's clearly missed out on in life because, it was just a singular focus, a very tunnel vision approach to being in a position of power. Whether it's, the fraudulent aspects of the book he wrote, the idea wasn't to be accurate. The idea was to find some sort of success and notoriety in this quest for power and leadership. And that sort of blind ambition is like, leadership and power for the sake of leadership and power without a real desire to actually lead people. Because if you listen to what he's saying, if you hear him talk, like he's not offering some sort of pathway for America. He's not saying that we are in this place as a country and together this is how we get there. He's just recycling old talking points and being even worse at it because the things that he is making up now, it is sort of it trends with the things that he's made up in his past. And his whole idea of Donald Trump previously, his whole idea of politics in general, like he had the term paper scrubbed by an old professor where he was very critical of the Republican Party, right? Like he thought that was the thing that would get him some exposure. He thought that was the thing that would make him become some sort of figure. It didn't work that way, and now he's embracing the things that he wants very publicly admonished.
I want to. I mean, I guess this is also related to JD Vance and to Kamala Harris, which is that one of the things that shifted in an instant when Biden stepped aside was what generation is leading the country, right? I think for me, one of the reasons why I was not excited and uninterested, beyond, I mean, like, the apocalypse that would happen if Trump won, was the same names on the ballot for 24 years, like Biden, Bush, Clinton, Trump. Like those are the only names, and the same generation. And now, like, there's an entirely new generation on the ballot, and JD Vance is one of them. And it feels like we haven't had a lot of training up of that generation. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's all of a sudden this new generation up there. You would have been a part of that as well. May still yet be up there. What does that mean? Do you think?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up, and that's why it's important to implement more leadership development. I think that's one thing we failed at for a long time. I don't think that there have been enough pathways to train people who are interested in running for office, but also what happens after they get in office. And you find a lot of people, younger people, and I see it too to this day, even around me, people who are in my age group who don't govern as if they're in my age group. They are doing the same exact stuff, the same exact things, previous generations, repeating a lot of the same failures. And so you think of a new generation of leadership, you think of a new path, and not to take from the Harris Walz campaign, but a new way forward. But that is the truth. Like you would assume that we get a new generation of leadership, we'll have a new direction, we'll have new ideas, a new vision, a new focus. We'll embrace the future. But it is so frustrating when I see people who are my age in office revert back to the same old tired ways of doing things. Whether it's the way campaigns are run or whether it's the way, old versions, old stale versions of policy are repurposed and repackaged. I think we need to be, focused on the exactly what young people are talking about, especially on college camps, whether it's, clean energy, whether it is what is work-life balance, right? What is going to be the future for, the household, the family, the individual? How will people get ahead in society? And I think that if the only examples you have as a leader are those of the past, then you are going to be doomed to do those same things. And it also requires some courage. And I wish there was more courage in office. I wish people were willing to be bold, but being bold sometimes requires a sacrifice. We see a lot of people out there who try to do the bold thing, who try to take, the step that and go in the uncharted territory. They pay a political price for it. And that quite frankly scares people, which goes back to my first point of whether you are doing this just to be in office or whether you're doing this to actually make a difference.
So what's an unpopular thing, like with what the previous generations or the generations who are currently leading us, that you think a younger generation needs to be more bold about? Like, I think of Palestine. I mean, that's the number one thing for me. And I think it's not my number one issue. It's just the thing that I think there's been an entire generational shift on. And it's one that current office holders, no matter how old they are not in touch with what clearly, like we see on college campuses, like what students are doing. But what do you think? What's something that seems like it might be toxic to the people that are in office, but might not be if they're looking to get younger voters interested?
Well, your point speaks to, failed policy in Mideast for generations. And that's what I mean. Like, people just want to do the same exact thing, maybe make it look a little bit different. And now we got this entire catastrophic mess on our hands. And it's always Democrats who have to deal with it. But it speaks to, thinking of the past. I think that in order for us, whether it is in the Middle East, Palestine, we need to have a more holistic, we need to have a more open conversation, also a more inclusive conversation. And I think that if the discussions and policy path forward is just relegated to a handful, which it has typically been, then we're going to be stuck in this mess for another generation. And I don't think that our politics can stand another generation of what's going on, of failed policy decisions. So with that being said, there are other issues like, you said that's not your only issue, like that's not your number one issue. You had issues like climate change that it feels like we're making all these strides. We have the Inflation Reduction Act, the most significant piece of legislation to address carbon emissions. At the same time, you had folks like Joe Manchin, he's not going to be returning to the Senate, who, threw a monkey wrench in many of the plans, whether it was that or with infrastructure. However, his replacement is going to be even worse on the issue. His replacement is a former coal executive, right, turned governor. And so I get a little scared. I get a little frustrated because in no way do I think, I don't think that incrementalism, especially at this point, as things have gotten so bad, I don't think that incrementalism is going to be, tolerated, because there are folks in some dire circumstances who don't have the time for incrementalism to help improve their lives. They'll be dead by the time the situation is fixed. So with that, understanding that this is still a slow process and there are political realities, I implore people to understand the power of organizing and the things that we are the most mad and most frustrated about. I think people should make those voices and make those concerns heard, and voice those concerns, voice those issues, and not just, to your elected leaders. If your elected leaders are being unresponsive to, what you're feeling, what you see as a deep need for society, then it's time to organize, galvanize, because chances are you are not the only person that feels that way. Chances are there's a whole cadre of people who are ready to take action, who are ready and willing to fight for more. Even issues like housing, right? Like, I think about the number of tenant organizations that are popping up demanding better conditions, demanding an end to the greed that is pushing so many people out of their homes, making cities unaffordable. And if wages aren't increasing, you're gonna end up with a bunch of vacant buildings in these places. Then, what is the result of that? What does the city look like? And if you have folks who just have been denied housing because it's completely unaffordable, at the same time, so much housing stock that's just sitting there vacant, I think it just I think it's emblematic of one of society's biggest economic failures.
That's why one of the most, I've said this on this show, I mean, as many shows as we had probably, which is one of the most galvanizing and radical things that happened at the Democratic National Convention was Tim Walz saying housing is a human right.
Hmm.
Never thought I'd hear a national Democrat say that. Never thought I'd hear a Senate Democrat say that. I mean, that is a radical position in the US, and it hasn't really gotten covered. But I agree with you. And in fact, it's interesting being here in Europe where housing, like owning a home, is not the norm, right? Most people rent. And, for generations, ever since, government-backed mortgages, the idea of getting rid of all the benefits that accrued if you own a home, which is a benefit that's mainly occurred for white people, right? That's where generational wealth comes. The idea of like doing something to shift away from that. Talk about a third rail in politics, right? Like the idea that you would change mortgage policy to give less benefit to those people has been just unthinkable. But what's happening right now is the shift in home ownership is changing so much. Young people just can't fucking afford it. I wonder if that's actually in our future, to shift to a more to shift policies so they support renters and tenants and not landlords and homeowners, just because young people just won't be owning, don't even think it's possible for them to own a home.
I promise you, it feels like whatever issue, whether it's housing, whether it's Middle East, whether it's even wages and job growth, it feels that we're always just one step away from cataclysm. And, housing is one of those issues, right? Like people are being pushed out. Like, where are people going to live? And it's only so far, society can be pushed, right? Like, I think that rubber band is bound to break on so many different issues. And the worst part about it is that we've had so much time to solve these issues. And the only thing worse than the fact that we've had so much time is there's always profit on people's misery. We have, we have a lot of folks who are making a lot of money. And if housing is a commodity, then people's first, their first thought, who control the majority of real estate, is going to be how much more money can be made. And how much more money can be made is totally irrespective of a person's ability to be able to even afford that housing. And it's just like, yeah, well, so what? You can't afford it? Well, tough shit, right? And that is not conducive to a functioning society. And if you got people just out on the streets, how desirable is any city, any community going to be if you have what? Then at the end of the day, though, that real estate value is going to plummet, is going to decline if these areas become less desirable with each passing year.
Yeah, no, it's a catastrophic, I was going to call it a feedback loop, but it stops being a feedback loop because catastrophe happens. The apocalypse happens, right?
Yep.
I don't feel like it is necessary to come up with, I hate the term silver lining, by the way, so I don't want to do that. And I don't think it's necessary to come up with like a happy version of this conversation, but I do want to ask you about something that might be somewhat lighter or somewhat more optimistic, which is the increase in enrollment and applications to HBCUs that's happened in the past couple of years, happening because of the end, like the lessening of the impact of affirmative action. But you went to an HBCU, right?
Yep.
And yeah, I can't remember who I interviewed about this, but I remember learning that there was a sense of loss when HBCUs stopped being a feeding ground. That sounds weird. A training ground for a lot of Black excellence, right? Do you think we're going to be seeing like a generation that comes up through that might be able to handle some of these challenges?
I think that with Kamala Harris's ascendancy, hopefully becoming the president, I think that this will certainly provide a new perspective on HBCUs. I'm a proud HBCU alum myself. Our Alabama A&M, the campus saw a 10% increase in enrollment from last year. The incoming class was the largest in A&M's history, about 2,500 students. It's a smaller school, but about 6,600 students enrolled this semester, which is incredibly exciting. I talk about my campus and the experience as much as I can. And I also think about upward mobility and the things that, I spoke a little bit about earlier, and opportunities that do or do not exist for people. And when the question comes up of whether HBCUs are still relevant, I say, of course, without hesitation, because I think where HBCUs are located. And I remember being an undergrad. I remember traveling to, we did a lot of road trips, right? Like we just went all over the South. And, you'll see a campus that is either like right next door or smack dab in the middle of a housing project. And it was like, like, oh man, they built this campus right in the middle of the project. Well, actually, the campus was there first. Then they built these housing projects around the campus. But to take the term that you hate, silver lining, the fact is, think about children who are growing up in those areas in low income housing, who go outside and see a college campus, who go outside and see people chasing dreams, who go outside and see people building a future for themselves and for their families and for their entire communities. I cannot tell you how inspiring that has to be for a person, and for these young people, these children, to look and see people who look like them going to college, getting an education, getting a degree, getting a job, coming back, doing something else. I truly think that's one thing, I wish we had in the Midwest. I wish we had these opportunities, because whether or not people went to college in states like Alabama and states like Tennessee, Mississippi, Arkansas, you name it, even if they didn't go to college, they know somebody who went. And college was always, and college is not for everybody. Completely understand and agree. In many ways, I don't think that college was for me. But my,
Might have to ask you more about that.
well, I'll say, as I believe that college was not for everybody. I did not have parents who felt the same way. Um,
Okay.
The funny part about that too is my dad has a degree in elementary education. He worked on an assembly line. Like he went to college and still worked, a blue collar job that did not require a college degree. Regardless, though, not going to college wasn't an option for me. But I think about young people where there's such a disassociation with higher education, because it's just not part of it's not part of the culture, where they are. It's they don't really know too many people sometimes, and so that's why I think HBCUs play an important role, if for nothing else. Young people seeing that as an option, as an idea, as something that is actually for them.
Yeah, I also think about so a couple things about HBCUs. One is the value of having all the people around you who look like you in leadership positions, running things. It just makes it easier to imagine running things outside of that situation, right? And
Yeah.
same for the neighbors, to the kids growing up around that, seeing the class president look like them, seeing like the faculty look more like them, seeing that that is a possible thing is maybe valuable, not just if they want to go to college, but just to lead stuff,
To
right?
be
Just to
in
be a
leaders,
leader.
I can't tell you how much I needed it. Like, so the thing about it too, I've only ever been to predominantly black schools my entire life, from kindergarten through college. But I will say, my high school was my high school had a lot of challenges. A lot of issues. And as I always say, it's not the school building; it is circumstances that surround a community that impact the inputs into a school. Right? Like, you can't have a school with 80% poverty, all these unaddressed issues that students are coming to school with, kids without, health insurance, not getting regular checkups, not getting making dental appointments, very few options for recreation, having to worry about, food on the table. You can't have this significant of a population in a school and not expect it to have not expect it to have an impact on educational outcomes. It's completely unrealistic. People fail to see root causes because that is the most difficult way for us to address student success issues. But in terms of fixing larger problems in society, it's the most beneficial, most efficient thing we can do. Now, with that being said, and the challenges that my school was dealing with, I was around, my friends' football team, and like I didn't get into real trouble at all by any means. Like I never gotten into any like nothing. Probably I may have gotten detention or suspended. Well, I don't even think I got suspended before. So like, there were certain parameters, like certain things I
Okay. All right.
couldn't do. Right, I still had to go home at the end of the day, and
Right.
I still wanted that bike. I still wanted my parents to buy me that bike. Still wanted, and I say buy me that bike. So I graduated high school at 16, so I couldn't drive for 3.5 years of high school. So there were certain things that I wanted. I knew I wasn't gonna have access to if I didn't do what I was supposed to in school. But that wasn't the case for a lot of my classmates, and sometimes I'd be goofing off. And like when I got to college, I saw just something completely different. I saw a more serious approach to education, because the people who were coming to school, it's like, yeah, you're there for a reason. And my first semester, I was on academic probation because I didn't do what I was supposed to do in school. I had too much freedom. I had too much time on my hands. I wasn't prepared, but
Well, I'm really glad that we're having this conversation because I feel like I want more people to know that your path that you took is a one that you can still get to lieutenant governor, right? Like one of the things I love about Tim Walz, which I have to be careful not to talk about him too much, but because you're Midwesterner, I'm at least adopted Midwesterner. Is that he's one of the first people who's not a lawyer to be at the top of it, not top of a ticket, to be on a Democratic presidential ticket, right? And I think, again, sort of seeing people who aren't the typical politician is important for a next generation to see, right? And even maybe to the point of, I wonder when the last time we had, I believe there might be someone in Congress right now who doesn't have a college degree, but wouldn't that be amazing and actually kind of cool? Like to say you don't even have to, like, Congress should be representative, meaning it should represent it should look like the people who vote for them, you
so
know?
I've said, like, after the midterms in 2018, when we elected the most women, the most diverse Congress, the youngest members of Congress at that time, the sentiment was that these were some unlikely candidates and some unlikely members of Congress. But my pushback was, these are the most likely Americans, right? Like, these are the people you run into at the grocery store, people you go to school with, people you associate with, people you worship with. So why shouldn't Congress look like the country? Why shouldn't it be representative of who we are? It is literally the House of Representatives, the people's house. And you can call it that as much as you want to. It's still not the people's house, right? Like, you still have, and you still have a disproportionate amount of wealth that's, not commensurate with the American public. So I think that we are making more steps towards more representative democracy and more representative Congress. I mean, the Senate is so far gone. I'll definitely be dead before the U.S. Senate looks more like the country. And
I hope
given
not.
by the time the U.S. Senate looks like America, well, yeah, I'll definitely be dead. I don't think it's, I don't, I'll give, even if I gave myself, what am I, 37 now? If I give myself 70 more years, that's 107. That's very generous. That is very generous.
Oh.
In 70 years, I do not see the United States Senate being completely representative of the United States of America. But, you hope that with each passing election cycle, we can take steps towards
Well,
getting to that point.
and also if the presidency starts to look more like America, which the Democratic ticket now does,
Mhm.
right? I think Senate can change. But yeah, let's go back to election stuff because we've kind of got in this, I think, really important track of the precursors to the election, right? Like creating the bench, creating the generation that's going to go next. Um, What else are you seeing? So, like I said, I've been here in Norway for 5 days. Let's see. I saw the Vance egg video. That was.
I don't even think I saw that.
Oh, he's like talking about price of eggs and saying like they were $4 or whatever, and there was a sign behind him with a different price, like a lower price. Like someone. Sometimes I feel like the campaign's like fucking with him. Like someone on the campaign is like trying to sabotage him. But let's see. I don't even know. Like I saw that Harris recommended another debate. You think she should do that? Do you think?
Oh, for sure.
That's okay.
For sure. Like just just have your way with this man, right? Like you've demonstrated. Like, I did 2 debates with Senator Johnson. That's one thing too. I like to caution people. I don't have to say that I wanted 2 debates. You can go watch them. They're on YouTube. You can make the decision for yourself. But I was glad to have this. After the first debate, I was glad to have the second debate. I welcomed it, opened it, and invited that one. And so, yeah, I do think that the vice president agreeing to a second debate was absolutely the right call. But even back to JD Vance, I can't let him off too easy in any way. Like, this is a dude, like, even going back to the ambition, like, this is a man who won't even stand up for his own family when, Trump campaign, de facto spokeswoman Laura Loomer, when she said that, if Kamala Harris wins, the White House is going to smell like curry. JD Vance, with a wife of Indian descent, failed to even, admonish those remarks, because this is the sort of blind ambition that puts power over, family. Was that Dukakis when they asked about remember that?
Yep.
I can't remember the exact thing, because I was young. I read about this in history. Sorry.
I was there when I
read about this in terms of historical context. But yeah, it's like, you got to at least be able to defend your family. Like, how can
it looked really bad. That's the parallel.
That is the parallel, right? Like this was a statement that was clearly directed towards people of South Asian and Indian descent, and his children, his wife. He failed to even, defend the honor of his household. How is he going to defend the honor of the White House?
Well, I mean, I don't want to fall onto too many masculinity tropes here, right? Defend the honor part of it. It's what I think is it's not even like defending the honor. It's saying like, that's the person I love. You're talking about the person I love.
That goes both ways.
Right. And whatever.
I'm sure his wife defends weird dudes.
Yeah. Oh God.
You will not admonish the weird man, because I love a weird man.
There you go.
At the
I would actually love to see that. I would love to see her be like, he is my weird dude. He's my weird little dude.
Yeah.
All right. So
that's how you prevent a lot of this other stuff that goes on. You got to show people love.
I agree. I think a lot of the worst things about the Republican Party could be prevented by having them grow up in households where there was more expressive sentiments about love and support. All right. Thank you, Mandela. I've been talking to Mandela Barnes. He's the former Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin, and also apparently has a Get Out the Vote crew called
Power to the Polls.
Power to the Polls, which probably has a website.
Power to the Polls, WI.org. Power to the Polls, WI.org. Oh, there's one thing I forgot to talk about. I don't know how I forgot to talk about this. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about it. I did an Iron Man a couple weeks ago. No, I don't know how I forgot to talk about that. I need to put this in every conversation I have for the next year.
I'm impressed.
Did an Iron Man.
Yeah. Are you going to get a tattoo or something?
In 2 days.
Are you serious?
Gotta get a tattoo. Come on now.
All right. Yeah, I'm a tattooed person. I think tattoos are actually like a really cool way of commemorating an experience. I think the best tattoos commemorate an experience.
Completely agree.
And I mean, that's how they came to be. And we won't go into a history of tattoos in Western culture. Instead, this is 90 Days with Ana Marie Cox. I'm not currently in America, which is why I have this. It is 41 days until the election. If you live in a red state, you probably only have 11 days to register. Wisconsin, you can do same-day registration, which is really good to know. Tomorrow will be 40 days till the election, and I won't be here. I'll be traveling back home from Oslo, but we have friend of the pod, Beto O'Rourke, as a guest host, so you should tune in for that. And if you are listening to this as a podcast, it is also available on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, it is also available as a podcast. And no matter where you are, please like, subscribe, comment, etc. Thanks again.
Eggs when Kamala Harris took office were short of $1.50 a dozen. Now a dozen eggs will cost you around $4.